It was supposed to be just another slow afternoon. The kind where time moves at a crawl, and nothing out of the ordinary happens. But then, I saw her. A woman, mid-30s, casually strolling down the aisle of the small grocery store, a look of mild irritation on her face. She was dressed in a plain black hoodie, jeans, and boots, nothing that screamed trouble. I was just finishing up the paperwork for another minor incident when I noticed her slipping an item into her bag. It was something small, maybe a bottle of perfume or a pack of gum, nothing worth making a scene over. But it didn't matter. She was stealing. I stepped forward, taking a deep breath. I'd been working as a store officer for nearly 3 years now, and this was a part of the job I hated. Confronting someone over something like this was never easy. I approached her quietly, keeping my hand close to my sidearm, just in case. "Excuse me, ma'am," I said, my voice firm. She didn't react at first, but then slowly turned to face me, her eyes scanning my uniform. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice calm, almost too calm. That's when I felt a twinge in the pit of my stomach. I glanced down at the item she'd stolen, now visible in her bag. "You're going to need to come with me," I said. Her gaze met mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw something strange flicker in her expression. Was it amusement? Disdain? It was hard to read. "Look, officer, I didn't steal anything," she said smoothly. "I'm just here to pick up a few things." I knew better than to let her brush it off. My eyes locked onto hers, and I motioned for her to follow me. As I led her toward the back of the store, I couldn't help but notice the cool, unflinching way she moved. Something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. As I led her toward the back office, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at me. It wasn't her calm demeanor that unsettled me. I'd dealt with plenty of people who tried to talk their way out of trouble. No, it was the way she moved, how confident and controlled she was, almost like she knew she was untouchable. I directed her to a chair by the desk, motioning for her to sit. "Please have a seat. We'll go over what happened," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. My hand hovered near the radio on my belt, just in case this turned into something bigger. She didn't immediately comply. Instead, she crossed her arms and stood there, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she was considering her options. "You don't need to call anyone." "I'm not going to resist," she said quietly, almost as if she was trying to reassure me. I nodded, but something about her tone felt rehearsed. I couldn't place it. Then, the door to the office opened, and one of the store managers stepped in, looking confused. "Everything all right, officer?" he asked, his gaze darting between me and the woman. I could see the tension in his shoulders. He probably noticed the shift in atmosphere. "Yeah, just a little situation here," I said, glancing back at her. "We're just going through the usual process." The woman didn't say anything in response. Instead, she calmly reached into her pocket, pulling out an ID badge. It wasn't a typical badge, though. This one had a metallic sheen, with a symbol I didn't immediately recognize. My eyes narrowed as I looked at it, and my stomach dropped. The letters SWAT were emblazoned across the top. My heart skipped a beat. "I don't think you understand, officer," she said, her voice finally losing the cool edge. "I'm not just someone you want to mess with." The room went silent. The manager and I exchanged a glance, and my pulse raced. I could feel the weight of her presence now, like a storm brewing on the horizon. She wasn't just some regular woman, she was someone dangerous. Before I could respond, she leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I think you need to check your paperwork, officer. You've made a big mistake." I stared at the badge in her hand, trying to wrap my mind around what she was telling me. SWAT. The Special Weapons and Tactics Division. My mind raced, but all I could do was stare at her with wide eyes, trying to make sense of what was happening. How had I gotten myself into this? The woman's expression softened slightly, but there was still an underlying tension. "I'm not your average shoplifter," she continued, her voice steady, even comforting. And I suggest you take a moment to figure out who you're really dealing with. The manager still hadn't spoken, but I could see his face turning pale. He was probably trying to figure out how he'd let this slip through his fingers. I forced myself to look away from the badge and focus on her. I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't know. My voice trailed off as I realized how ridiculous I sounded. She raised an eyebrow. You didn't know? You didn't recognize me when I walked in here? Her gaze was sharp, like she was dissecting every move I made. I had to swallow the lump in my throat. No, I began, but she interrupted me, her tone suddenly colder. Officer, I've been on enough high-stakes operations to know how to handle myself. I don't need some rookie messing it up for me, she said, standing up slowly. There was no denying the authority in her voice now. It was unmistakable. I felt a wave of embarrassment rush through me. Here I was, trying to enforce the law, and I'd just tried to arrest someone far more qualified than me to handle situations like this. A feeling of shame settled in my chest, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was in control of the situation. The woman placed the badge on the desk between us. Here's what's going to happen, she said calmly, yet with a chilling precision. You're going to forget this ever happened. We're going to walk out of here, and you're going to act like nothing was ever amiss. I was about to protest, but she held up her hand. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. Her words felt like an order, not a suggestion. The manager, still standing off to the side, shifted uncomfortably. Is this really necessary? She turned to him, and there was something about her gaze that made him instantly shrink back. Yes. It is, she said firmly. And if I ever hear about this again, you won't like what happens. There was no arguing with her. She was SWAT, and I was just a store officer. In that moment, I understood just how much power she held. I watched in stunned silence as the woman turned and walked toward the door. The tension in the room was palpable, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. My mouth felt dry, and my head was spinning. It was like everything I thought I knew about authority had been flipped on its head in a matter of minutes. She paused just before opening the door, glancing over her shoulder at me. You'll be fine, she said, her voice soft now, almost reassuring. But next time, be a little more careful about who you try to arrest. And with that, she was gone. The door swung shut behind her with a quiet thud, leaving me alone with the manager, who still looked like he was trying to process what had just happened. I stood there, motionless for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts. Was that really just SWAT? I couldn't stop replaying the interaction in my head. I had almost arrested someone who could easily end my career with a single word. Hell, I could be dead right now if she had decided to react differently. The manager cleared his throat, breaking my trance. So, what now? He asked, clearly as lost as I was. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to shake off the shock. We don't report this, I said, though the words felt strange coming out of my mouth. Nothing happened here. He looked at me, hesitated, and then nodded. It was clear he understood. He knew exactly who she was, and he wasn't going to challenge her either. It was the safest option. I reached for the paperwork on my desk, crumpled it up, and tossed it into the trash bin. Forget this ever happened. It's just another day on the job. I could feel the weight of it settling in. I had just encountered someone far above my pay grade, someone I would never want to cross again. I didn't know who else she might be. Was she just the commander of the SWAT team? Was she involved in even more dangerous operations? What if she was someone more connected, more powerful than I could ever imagine? I didn't want to find out. With a last glance toward the door, I grabbed my jacket, ready to leave for the day. The normalcy of my routine had been shattered, and I wasn't sure if I would ever feel the same again. The drive home was quiet, too quiet. My mind raced with everything that had happened, replaying the moment over and over again. What if I had pushed her further? What if I had tried to make her stay? I kept imagining different outcomes, each one worse than the last. But the truth was, I had no idea who I had just encountered, only that I'd been lucky enough to walk away. The next few days were a blur. I kept my head down at work, avoiding any mention of the incident. Word spread quickly that a store officer had nearly arrested someone who turned out to be an undercover SWAT commander, but no one seemed to know the details. I was careful not to ask any questions. No one wanted to get on the wrong side of her, that was for sure. The last thing I needed was for someone to find out how close I'd come to making a serious mistake. I didn't hear anything more about it. There were no repercussions, no strange visits or phone calls. It was as if the whole event had been erased from existence. In the weeks that followed, I returned to my routine, but something had changed. The world felt a little smaller, a little more dangerous, and I had a deep respect for the power that people in uniform could wield, especially when they were the last people you expected to be anything more than ordinary. I never saw her again. The woman with the calm demeanor and the commanding presence who could have ended my career with a single word. But every now and then, I would catch a glimpse of someone on the street, someone wearing a jacket or a uniform, and for a split second, I'd wonder if they too were hiding something much bigger than anyone realized. I'd learned a valuable lesson that day: don't judge a book by its cover, and definitely don't assume you know who you're dealing with. I had no idea who she really was or what her world was like. But I would never forget the way she looked at me, the way she made it clear that she could end me without breaking a sweat. I could only hope I wouldn't cross paths with her again. I didn't think I'd survive a second round.